Hey guys, so for this week's roguelite, we're reviewing Into the Breach, which is a fun turn-based strategy roguelite that's one of my favorite roguelites out there. So with all my roguelite reviews, this review is broken into sections, so feel free to skip around to whichever ones you do care about, and feel free to skip whichever ones you don't care about. As I mentioned, it's a great roguelite for people who are into strategy games or like that kind of turn-based gameplay, and doesn't rely on speed or reflexes unlike a lot of other roguelites. So in this game, you get a set of mechs. Your goal is to protect the buildings and defeat the mech, which are these insect-like enemies that try to destroy your mechs and obviously also try to destroy the buildings. This is a free game on Epic Games a while back, so you've been collecting those, you might have picked it up, and you can check it out there. It's also currently on the Xbox Game Pass. If you have that, you can check it out there as well. Into the Breach is a turn-based tactical strategy roguelite where the goal is to defend your cities from the mech. Mech are these insect creatures that can take different forms. Each would have different attacks, different moves, different healths, etc, etc. You'll slowly learn all different variations as you play the game, and each island will tell you what that can spawn there before you choose the island. This game is made by the same makers as Faster Than Lights. If you played that, this is another game by them. Although they play pretty differently, they're both pretty iconic roguelites. You play through the game, you defend these various islands. You can sort of choose which islands you want to defend, or you can defend all of them. And each island has a different theme, sort of different mechanics. So each island obviously has the same core gameplay, but they might have a couple different specific things that are unique to that island. The ice island, for example, your mech can be frozen, you can freeze the mech as well. So that's a mechanic that you would have on the ice island that you wouldn't have on the desert island. So a lot of the actual gameplay itself is sort of thinking through what moves you want your mechs to do in order to time it out and coordinate all your moves so that you can prevent the mech from damaging your buildings in each turn and, try to kill as many mech as possible in each turn. It'll let you know which mech's going to move first, which one will go in what order, what time will certain environmental effects happen. So it's very easy to know, if I move this mech here, I can see it will attack the other mech and kill it first, that kind of stuff. The game really gives you all the information you need to know in order to plan things out. It sort of depends, how much time you want to spend thinking about it. It can definitely be a game where if you want to, kind of like chess, you can spend like forever on each turn, or if you just don't really want to play that way, you can do your turns a little bit faster, and that's also totally doable as well, and you can play in that style. Just don't expect to get like a perfect run on hard mode if you're not thinking through each turn carefully. So do you think this gameplay works? Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's taking that sort of tactical strategy game and putting it into the roguelite format in a way that's very successful. It can take a little while to learn the nuances of all different moves, different mech teams, but once you sort of get that down, sort of understand what the mech are doing, it's a lot of fun to try to plan out as well as possible to prevent as much damage as possible, minimize damage, and try to defeat as many mech as possible in each turn and sort of get through things. So if you're a fan of tactical games, if you're a fan of strategy games, you want to see a roguelite with those elements, definitely a great game to check out. In terms of overall difficulty, I'd say it's maybe the easiest roguelite that I played. I cleared the game on normal on my second try with 2 islands, but that being said, you can increase difficulty a lot, even within sort of a difficulty level. So even in normal, if you choose to clear 3 islands or 4 islands instead of 2, you'll be more difficult because you'll have more battles to fight, more chances to fail, and the final battle will be more difficult as well. Additionally, there's some difficulty levels, so there's a hard mode, there's also an easy mode if you think normal is too difficult, but still, all that being said, I'll talk about this more in the progression section, just beating the game at all is really not that hard to do. And because of that, unlike a lot of other roguelites, a lot of the replayability comes from trying different things and some other types of progression as opposed to just, can you clear the game? A successful run can take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, depending on how many islands you clear and sort of how long you take to think about each of your turns. Also pause run any time, save it, and come back to it later. So where's the randomness? Where's the RNG into the breach? So first I'll just say there's no RNG, there's no randomness in the attacks at all. So the damages and the ranges of the attacks of your mechs are completely set. The only possible randomness in the attacks is that sometimes your buildings can take no damage even if they are attacked. It's a benefit that can be buffed actually. But there's a good amount of RNG in where mechs spawn and how they move and what the map layouts are. But the game does give a good amount of warning for these RNG elements. So before each mech spawns, there'll be a little spot in the ground. You can see where the mech will come up the next turn. And you can also see what mech you might have in a particular region before you choose that island. And you can also skip islands altogether. So if you absolutely hate the mechanics of the ice island, you can just choose to not do that. And even within each island, you can choose which regions you want to actually defend. So if you hate the train region, you can choose to skip that and defend other regions instead. The RNG that you can't really control, the RNG that isn't really predictive, would be where the enemies move and what they choose to attack. And so you can see, the range of movement an enemy can have, but you can't tell, until that turn what a certain mech will attack. And this perhaps leads to the only case of frustrating RNG in the game is when you set up for the mech and they just move in the exact, you can't possibly hit all these mechs to save all these cities, and so you have to lose something just because of where they all go. But that's sort of part of the game, adapting to that. Trying to move your mechs to attack these mechs wherever they are is sort of what makes the game fun, what makes the game refreshing. But at times it can be really frustrating if you're like, this is the only possible layout on the map of these mechs that I cannot defend against. But that's sort of the only place where I would say RNG can be frustrating. The other main place where RNG comes in is what items and which pilots you get as you play through the game as rewards from various events. That said, the rewards and these items are never really crucial to winning the game. You can win the game without getting any new pilots or any new items and stuff for your mech. You can win with what is with each mech team, although perhaps it might be a little more important for if you do a lot of random squads, because then you might try to get some sort of cohesion, some sort of synergy, then maybe those items and pilots are more important. But as a whole, while there is a lot of RNG there, you can sort of adapt with whatever you get, or you can use none of the items and you will still be fine. That's sort of the RNG and randomness into the breach. It's very manageable. I think it mostly adds life to the game and sort of makes it more replayable. It never really feels hindering or frustrating with the niche counterexample of the Vec moving and attacking in a very particular way that you just can't do anything about. The main unique mechanic of Into the Breach is just that it's a turn-based strategy, tactical roguelite. There really aren't that many games in that style. A lot of roguelites are very fast-paced, rely on your reflexes, and this one is really a roguelite. You can sort of pause and think through very deliberately what you want to do. The other main unique mechanic or element of Into the Breach is that there's a possibility for a perfect run because there's a score cap. So a lot of roguelites have theoretically infinite scores, or the max score you can get in each run depends on what your seed is, but that's not true for Into the Breach. The max score is taking no damage in your city. So there is a theoretical perfect score. It's not true in most roguelites. Other than the core gameplay, which is obviously very important, and the idea of a perfect score, a perfect run, I wouldn't say Into the Breach has a lot of other unique mechanics. So now let's talk about the sense of progression and replayability Into the Breach. First, talk about horizontal progression, which is progression that doesn't really change the difficulty of the game anyway. And then after that, I'll talk about vertical progression, just progression that does change the difficulty in some way. So first, horizontal progression. The first example is not really a type of progression per se, but each island's different from each other. So you unlock the islands one at a time, and as you play through different islands, you can see some different mechanics, some different regions, different events. You also fight against a variety of different Vec. So just sort of learning different mechanics, different islands, and seeing different Vec that you face, I would say is sort of the first sense of horizontal progression that you sort of run across. Next set of horizontal progression is just unlocking all different pilots in the game. So you can have 3 different pilots, and each of them can have a different ability. There's a number of different pilots you can unlock with different abilities, so just unlocking those is a sense of horizontal progression. There's also different mech teams you can play with. This is probably the biggest sense of horizontal progression in the game. It's a lot of fun to learn what all the different teams do and how they sort of work together. The teams definitely have very different play styles, so some of them I'm just really awful with and some of them I'm much better with, but it's a lot of fun to experiment with all of them. Even if I won't play a lot of games with certain mech teams, it's fun to just have them there and to be able to play with them. There's also achievements for each mech team, and there's general achievements you can do with any mech team, so that's another sense of horizontal progression. But also random and custom squads, so it can be fun to sort of give yourself challenges, be able to play with whatever random squad you want, or you want to sort of see what the best mech combo you can make is and see how you can play with that. And finally, this is sort of a very, very mild spoiler, but there's a secret squad you can unlock as well if you get all the achievements in the game. So that's the horizontal progression. So now let's talk about the vertical progression. Progression, again, that changes the difficulty of the game in some way. As with all roguelites, the first sense of vertical progression is just can you clear the game? Into the Breach, that's very easy to do with just the first squad and doing a 2-island clear. As I mentioned earlier, I did that on my second try, so just getting any clear is pretty easy to do, so that's not a very hard thing to do, unlike a lot of other roguelites. But while just getting a basic clear is easy, there are some quick senses of vertical progression. So like I mentioned earlier, I cleared 2 islands to get that first clear, but if you clear 3 or 4 islands, then a certain difficulty, it's much harder with each island that you do. Maybe not much harder, but it is harder with each island that you do. Then next, after you've gotten a 4-island clear on normal mode, you can go for hard difficulty, which just has more Vec spawn and more alpha Vec. And alpha Vec are just same movement, attack, etc. as your normal Vec, but they have higher health and they do more damage to each attack. And then after you've cleared it on hard mode, or maybe before then, depending on what you're going for, you can go for a perfect score game. So a perfect score in hard mode is going to be higher than a perfect score in normal mode, but because if you take no damage, you can get a perfect score. That's sort of something you can strive for as well, the sense of vertical progression, trying to get the perfect score in a game, which basically means not letting any of your buildings get hurt. In regards to vertical progression, some people find the difficulty of Into the Breach pretty lacking. It's a pretty easy game as a whole, but some people, even on hard and trying to get a perfect score, they don't find it as difficult as some other roguelites. I think that's probably true. If you really want the hardest roguelite possible, maybe it's not the game for you, but if you want roguelite with decent difficulty, if you play the game on hard, it can get you that level of difficulty. I mean, if you're going for a perfect score on hard, it's definitely hard, but if you don't care about the score part and just want to clear, then there are harder games out there. But really a lot of the progression, a lot of the replayability from Into the Breach comes from trying different squads and sort of whether it's just the main squads are there, whether it's messing around with custom squads, messing around with random squads, just sort of that experimentation, doing the game with different mechs. That's where a lot of the replayability comes from. But if the kind of person just wants the game to get harder and harder and harder, that's not what Into the Breach is going to be. So now let's talk a little about the narrative Into the Breach, which is a pretty short discussion because there's not that much story there, as with most roguelites. So sort of the background of what you're doing, which is you're going to these different worlds, these different timelines in order to save these planets from the mech. But beyond that, sort of setting up the world and some basic flavor of the different leaders, the different setups, the different islands, there's not that much there. But again, pretty standard for roguelites, so it's not really a con, but definitely not a pro. If you're looking for a story-driven roguelite, this is not the one for you. So now for my overview, summary, and verdict of Into the Breach. So as a whole, it's definitely really strongly recommended from me. If you're into roguelites and you're into turn-based strategy or tactical games, definitely check it out. I would say the main caveats from recommendation are if you only play roguelites in order to beat them, you can sort of clear a roguelite once, then you're done with it. This is probably not the game for you. It's pretty easy to get that first clear, and it's just not that hard to do that. So if you're gonna finish playing after that, you're not gonna get that much time out of it. On the other hand, if you're into trying a bunch of different mechs, if you want to try a bunch of teams, see what the game has to offer in that way, then you're gonna have a lot more fun with it. Additionally, if you're interested in going for a perfect run, trying to time and think through everything methodically and do everything perfectly, you could also have a lot of fun with Into the Breach. So again, I strongly recommend it. I've had a lot of fun with this game. It's one of my favorite roguelites for sure, and it's one of the few that is sort of a purely strategy, tactical roguelite, and I appreciate that that's there. So this game was free on Epic Games at one point, so if you picked it up then, you can check it out there. It's also on the Xbox Game Pass right now, as I mentioned earlier, so if you have that, you can check it out there as well. It goes on sale for pretty cheap pretty often. I've seen it for $7.50, maybe it's gone below that. Wouldn't be too surprising because the same developer has dropped the price of Fast and Light pretty low, but I really recommend it. If you're at all interested, I definitely encourage you to check it out. Thanks for watching this video, I definitely appreciate it. If you're interested in seeing these more videos, feel free to subscribe. I'll link my playlist with all my roguelite reviews in the description below, so if you want to watch any of those, feel free to check them out. Again, thanks for watching.